go through and allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they're working on, as opposed to me just reading through their bios, which is awfully boring, having moderated many panels in my day. And what we'll then probably do is let you go through, grab your lunch, come back, and we will start the panel. We have some pre-submitted questions and answers, but I suspect that among us here this morning we'll have plenty to talk about. Again, my name is Mackenzie, and I'd like to welcome our panel, and I'll start with you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I am Colonel Glenn Davis, and I am the Director of Logistics for Air Force Reserve Command out at Robins Air Force Base, representing close to 27,000 logisticians across the globe. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to start off with, and the first of which is I think it's important to point out that we have 373 aircraft assigned to Air Force Reserve Command, and amazingly, we are not the lead MAGCOM for any of those weapon system platforms. As such, we are heavily dependent on the National Guard Reserve Equipment Account to provide us with the funds we need to keep our aircraft relevant. And the modifications that we're doing on these aircraft are on track. Our aircraft maintenance manpower is at a state that I believe there are no issues with maintaining the modifications with the funding that we have available today. Furthermore, as AFRC is not the lead for any of these platforms, we are appropriately grouped with the Air National Guard and the active duty when it comes to developing aircraft availability standards and the centralized asset management funding strategy for program depot maintenance. The present FY09 PDM, or program depot maintenance funding, is adequate to take care of our AFRC assets. However, if you look out into the future, FY10 funding and beyond, projected to be at 60% or less, will not meet the needs of Air Force Reserve Command. Finally, there's a careful watch ongoing with the shelf life of our aircraft. And in recent days, there's been particular interest with our C-17, our KC-135, and our F-16 fleets. All of those weapon systems are either presently engaged in an active association or they're projected to engage in an active association. Our C-17s are currently being utilized at a utilization rate that is the same as active duty. Our KC-135s, however, are only operating about slightly half the active duty utilization rate. And our F-16s, who have a shelf life of approximately 8,000 hours, are projected to last until 2020. However, it's important to point out that if we engage in an active association with our F-16s, depending on the flavor of that relationship, we could reduce the lifespan of the F-16 by as much as 3 years through an active association, so we'll have to monitor that very closely. Those are three of the key points that I wanted to highlight this morning, and I will yield the rest of my time to my esteemed colleague to the right.
Great. And if you each want to describe a little bit more about your bios, since I'm turning that over to you, so it's a little more interesting to our audience.
Okay, my introduction will be slightly shorter than Glenn's. I'm the Vice Commander out at the Tucson Test Center, so all the 373 airplanes that Glenn is responsible for, we do all the operational and development testing for. So when I get up and talk, I'll talk to you about how the Air Force Reserve and the ARC requirements process differs from the active duty, why in many cases that's much better, and why in some cases it's not quite as good.
Great.
I am Colonel Jeff Eggers. I'm the Director of ISR Innovations at the headquarters A2. But I'm actually up here in my previous role, where I spent from 2003 to 2007 working Predator and Reaper operations as a Deputy Group Commander to the active duty combat and training groups out at Creech and Nellis Air Force Base. And then my last year at the Pentagon as the Director of UAS Transformation. Predator and Reaper are probably one of the best examples of total force integration, where we have 5 Air National Guard squadrons, 2 reserve squadrons, and 4 or 5 now active duty squadrons in all different forms of association or independent operation, which I'd be happy to talk to you about as much as you have any questions over.
I suspect we will get heavily into TFI. Last but not least.
Hi, I'm Colonel Charlie Sachs. Recently transferred from Headquarters Air Force, where I was Deputy Director for Regular Warfare Requirements, down to Headquarters AETC. As many of you know, General Lorenz, the commander of Headquarters AETC, took on the task of standing up the or institutionalizing Air Advisor training. We are in the process of standing up an Air Advisor schoolhouse. We have a Air Advisor course at Fort Dix now that meets the requirements as we send airmen into theater for CAF-T and CAP-TF, and I can tell you what those acronyms are when we go further into the discussions. But suffice to say that the Reserve and the Guard play very heavily into those efforts. General Padilla helped stand up CAF-T and also CAP-TF, and when you look at the effort across the Air Force, there are many reservists and guardsmen who are developing the baseline or foundational pieces of irregular warfare.
Good. Since we have a little bit of time before we actually start the luncheon, I'm going to change it up yet again. And Colonel Davis, I think you summarized most of your remarks, but I wanted to offer you each of the chance to go more into depth into what you would present to the audience. And before we move into Q&A is when we will break for a brief moment to allow you to get lunch. Did you want to add anything to your previous comments?
Well, I don't know that I have that much more to add, other than there is considerable interest in gaining access to the AFRC iron. I've had ongoing conversations with my counterparts, General Feder at ACC and General Merchant at AMC, and we are partnering right now to initiate a total force integration IPT that should begin in the next couple of weeks, to explore what those organizations will look like, so that we have the right blend of aircraft maintainers and logisticians in the organization. But we're going to have to do a lot of work in the F-16 world to make sure that we've got a fleet that will make it to the 2017 or beyond time frame. The other thing that we have to do to make sure we're viable into the future is ensure that aircraft availability standards for the Air Force Reserve Command remain identical to those of the Air National Guard and the active duty forces. There have been a number of taskers out recently that solicited our input on whether we should have a different standard or not, and we have unanimously responded to all the taskers that our standard will remain the same, as will be our standard for centralized asset management funding. So I think all of those are pretty important to make sure that we keep in mind as we march forward over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that's all I should probably add at this point.
Great, thank you. Colonel Dick.
You want everything at this point?
Yes.
You can sit down if you'd like. You're just standing up there while we're all talking and we're sitting down. It's kind of a strange thing. The Guard and Reserve Test Center is kind of an interesting organization. We're about 40% Guard, 40% Reserve, and then 20% active duty. And it's kind of a blended organization that's responsible for every aircraft and weapon system in Air Force Reserve. And what we try to do is what the Air Force is not doing. The history of the test center is, unfortunately General Stenner isn't here because I think he would have gone into it, because he was out at the test center in, I think, the mid-'80s. The Air Force would love to take care of their legacy equipment. They would love to palm for it. They would love to be able to budget, but very often that stuff falls below the cut line, and that's just what happens. So Congress set up NGRIA